Hey guys, it's Kaylee. I'm back with another what sold from last week video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my sales that are happening right now on eBay, Poshmark, and Depop. Those are the three main platforms that I am selling on. In today's video, I'm going to cover my fastest sales on all three of those platforms, items that sold for the most, and also some items that I just want to mention for things that you might want to be looking out for while you're outsourcing. If you like staying in the know about what buyers are purchasing right now, then consider subscribing because I do these what sold videos every week. Let's dive right in. I had some really fast sales last week. A lot of these that I'm covering with you in this section actually happened in less than a week. A lot of them within the same day that they were listed. And this is the first one I wanted to share. This is the brand Jamie Brooke, which is a vintage, very more mature looking brand. The reason I picked up this dress was because I could lean it into many of the popular style aesthetics, and I'm having some really good luck with full velvet dresses. However, trying to be a little bit more cautious as we go towards warmer weather because not everybody will be buying velvet. And so I priced competitively because of that. This one I had a hard time with after getting it photographed because I just did not feel like it looked how the buyer would envision it styled. So I did create an AI modeled image. I did a video on how to do that. If you're interested, you can just look up Cayley, Elaine, AI model or ChatGPT or whatever. So this is how I had it styled, went very 90s grunge with it. And I'm so glad that I did that because this is just, this cover photo is just not something that the buyer is going to be looking for based off of the aesthetics that I'm leaning it into. And so if you're somebody that does have an item like this, it's definitely worth it to take the time to make a better cover photo if you don't think it's going to translate correctly to the buyer. That can be maybe tied differently. That could be a flat lay instead of hanging. That could be on a mannequin, or you can also do an AI modeled image if that's what you chose to do. I chose to do that because I really wanted the accessories to be styled around it so it didn't look too mature. And this sold the same day that I got it listed onto Poshmark. It sold for an offer of $24. Like I said, I was being very competitive just because we're going out of season, and my earnings were $19.20 on this order. That is crazy that it sold in just 0 days. And so I'll definitely be keeping that in mind for some of my style-based pieces if I feel like they need an extra edge. Okay, next up, this one is more of a brand-based piece. This is soft surroundings. I still love picking up soft surroundings in plus sizes, specifically the tops, but I also love picking up their longer length, more substantial dresses. They tend to have a lot of really good boho, eclectic, kind of artsy looking stuff. And something I've been really focused on is with each brand-based item that I pick up, making sure to lean into the keywords that the soft surroundings buyer would be looking for, right? Or maybe it's J. Crew or it's Vuori or whatever, but really heavily diving deep into what those buyers are searching for when it is a brand-based piece and they're in love with the brand. So leaning into those. So with this one, I use the exact style name, which was called the Sultana Maxi Dress. This was in a size extra large, which really helped it. Also long sleeve. And I use keywords such as boho, patchwork, artsy, hippie, and bohemian for this. This also sold the same day that we got it listed for an offer of $63, and my order earnings were $50.40 on Poshmark. Okay, next one. This is a brand every reseller should know about. It has taken over the athletic wear category and as a whole has a very high sell-through rate in almost everything. And so whenever I see this, I get really excited. It's also very often overlooked just because this rip tag right here is not usually on it. And so sometimes all you'll see is the little patch. So next time you come across Vuori, make sure you're really feeling the fabric. It has a very specific feel, just like Athleta, just like Lululemon. And so if you know what it feels like, you won't miss it, even if this tag right here is missing. This one did have its tag and it was a size extra large. It was called the Daydream Crew Neck Long Sleeve T-shirt. I had this listed, I think for around 35 and accepted an offer of 30. This sold the exact same day that it got listed. No surprise, this brand has a very high sell-through rate and is really in demand, especially in larger sizes. And my earnings on this one were $24. All right, pivoting a little bit to a not so high sell-through rate brand. This is the brand Norma Kamali. Now, I used to pick up everything in this brand, and this one kind of gave me some trouble while I was listing it because it's so outside of what I consider Norma Kamali to be. Norma Kamali is very well known for like their black, all over plain solid black pieces. They're very chic looking. This one was camo. It was a V-neck t-shirt, not as dressy as things normally are. And so when I was listing this, I did have some trouble finding those keywords. And that's when, again, I leaned into what are buyers that love this brand looking for? What things are they searching? How would they describe the items? And so I came up with this title and these keywords, which were Norma Kamali women's camo shirt, size extra large, organic cotton, V-neck, designer, and edgy. I also used keywords like modern, chic, and model off-duty for this one. I listed this one for $35 on Poshmark, and I accepted an offer of $29 in just 3 days. And my earnings were $23.20. And I'm honestly pretty surprised that this sold within 3 days, which tells me that those keywords that I researched into for the Norma Kamali buyer really did help. And you can look into, how to lean into keywords for brand-based stuff in many different ways. But one of the easiest ways is probably to just go to their website and to see how do they describe themselves? How are they describing the items on the website? Maybe their about me section or just like branding on the page. Obviously, you don't want to do this for every single piece, but if it's a brand that you come across or list pretty frequently, then once you research it, you're going to remember those and you can use them over and over again in your listing to really target it to that buyer. Again, this works best with brand-based pieces, not necessarily style-based stuff. Whole different ball game for that. Okay, next up, this is Lululemon. I've mentioned before, I'm very picky with Lululemon these days, just not as good of demand for the brand as a whole. But this one was a size 10 and it was a modern t-shirt. It appeared to be one of the newer styles. And so we listed it competitively even still. My title was Lululemon women's short sleeve drape back athletic t-shirt, size 10, white workout, and then I used keywords such as sport, gym, and active. We only listed this for around 30 on Poshmark. Again, being competitive just because the demand, even for these newer styles, just isn't really there. And I accepted an offer of $25, which made my earnings 20. Okay, next up we have a bag that actually got returned and then relisted and then sold almost immediately after that relist. This one took just 4 days to sell after we got it back and relisted it. And it was a Dooney and Burke all weather leather crossbody bag. Dooney and Burke is very similar to Coach where they're like very neutral, like heavy leather pieces perform the best, typically vintage. And so with Dooney, again, not a great sell-through rate, but especially when it is in this style, neutral colors, leather, vintage performs really well. This also like I don't know what you would call this closure, but this like flap over style seems to also be trendy in both Coach and Dooney and Burke. So that was another indicator to me. This one I actually got through, I believe, consignment. However, it did have a lot of wear, so I had to price competitively because of that. Specifically, some of the edges were pretty heavily worn down. And so we priced accordingly. And there was like ink stains inside. But even with all of that, still a great piece. I listed this for $50 on eBay and somebody accepted our automatic offers to watchers, which we send out through all platforms on Nifty. And it sold for around $45 and order earnings was close to $31 on this piece. So even with a bunch of wear, still a really good return on investment and definitely a piece that I would consider getting again. Okay, next one is this chocolate brown women's J. Crew 100% cashmere sweater. Cashmere, similar to velvet, definitely starting to go out of season. And so it's going to be a harder sale to move pieces like this, which is why you want to make sure to be competitive with your pricing, use really great keywords, and just do all the things to make sure that it moves. And so my title for this one was J. Crew Women's 100% Cashmere Sweater Size Small, Chocolate Brown, Crew, Old Money, and Luxe. I also use keywords in the description, preppy, soft, cozy, and quiet luxury to move this piece quicker and price competitively. Shades of brown, still very trendy. A lot of people loving those rich and earthy tones. And so this shade of brown, I really wanted to highlight the chocolate brown in the title, which is not something I normally do. I don't usually put color in the title unless I really think it's going to add value. And in this case, I did think it added value. This sweater sold in just 4 days and it sold for $40 and my earnings were $32. Okay, next up we have a piece that had a lot more wear than I initially realized when I picked this up at a thrift store. This is a vintage Hollister t-shirt. It's kind of I would consider it a bread and butter style based piece for me. It's not, the top-notch thing that people are looking for in vintage Hollister, but it did have some factors that were performing well. But after I got it, I realized there was like major discoloration over it that I just missed, like a major discoloration on the sleeve, like yellowing throughout. I also had a lot of pilling. I was aware of the pilling, but not the discoloration. And so I priced very competitively to move it at all costs. Did not want to see this thing sit in my store. And I actually ended up with a decent net profit despite that, just because, again, vintage Hollister, some of their pieces are very in demand. With all of that in mind, this sold in just 5 days, which I was again surprised and happy with, and it sold on an offer for $20, making my earnings $16. Make sure if you guys have a piece that you'd consider a mistake, whether that's it ended up with a bunch of flaws or perhaps maybe it didn't fall within your sourcing rules for yourself and you really need to move it. Maybe it didn't have as much demand as you thought it would. Try to move that item at all costs versus just letting it sit and trying to squeeze more money out of it, because there are already so many things against it that you really don't want to tie up that money for too long when you could get the money back and reinvest it into something better. Okay, next up, another super fast sale. This one also surprising. This is American Eagle. This is a like Y2K style milkmaid dress. It is maxi length. It's tiered. It's got cap sleeves. It's got some crochet, and it's also a shade of brown that people are looking for. So just lots of factor stacking, but also a really good style-based piece, even though it's just American Eagle. This one also had a small sign of wear on the strap, so I kept that in mind as well. I listed this for $40, which might sound high to some of you, but after selling these style-based pieces for so long, I can tell which factors like comboed together like people are going to be willing to pay up for. And this definitely had a lot of those factors. So I listed for $40. It did sell for my full asking price within just 6 days. And order earnings on this one were $29.63. Okay, next up are a couple of Depop sales that sold really quickly. This one was lightning fast too. You can see this one had a ton of likes on every platform, but specifically Depop, I noticed the buyers were very into this pair of shoes. So these are a pair of Jeffrey Campbell's. Jeffrey Campbell is a well-known designer brand. I would say they definitely don't have a super high sell-through rate, but depending on what you have can do well. And these ones were very uniquely shaped, which is kind of what Jeffrey Campbell goes for. They're very like old money, but kind of quirky. And so the shape of these was really good. That square toe also helped. And even I think the like brown tortoise shell look, also very trendy, very Y2K type of piece, and also a statement piece. Listed these ones for $85 and they ended up selling in just 6 days for an offer of $70, which I accepted. And luckily on Depop, they don't take very many fees. And so earnings on this one was $66.94, which I'm super happy with. If you're considering adding an additional platform, Or maybe you're like me and Poshmark's just driving you absolutely bonkers and you're like, I might need to replace that platform. Haven't done it yet, but definitely considering it. Depop is an excellent option just because their fees are so low. Just like any other platform, they have ups and downs. It has its quirks, but I have found Depop to be a really profitable platform. And now that we're going all in on it, I'm definitely seeing those consistent sales every single week. Okay, next up, another Depop sale. This one also sold in just 6 days. This is a completely style-based piece. I think we got this at the Benz too, which is great. Super lightweight. Kathy Roberts, not a good brand at all about the style. This one was very sheer, very romantic. It was also a kimono, which I've talked about before, like a topper piece that a lot of people are liking layering. It also had a split flare sleeve, just a lot of excellent details, and this like lettuce trim. Very trendy as well. My title for this one was Y2K Pink Sheer Fairy Top, size 10, open flare sleeve, romantic floral, and lettuce hem. And I also used some more keywords in the description as well. But I listed this for $35 and it sold for my full asking price on Depop, again, in less than a week. And my earnings were $30.32, which I think is excellent. Like, honestly, anything like 25 bucks and up, for net profit, I'm really happy with, especially when it's coming from the Benz because so low cost of goods. And this piece in particular, very lightweight. So I love selling those lightweight pieces. Okay, the next one sold on Poshmark. I also got this from the bins and it was super lightweight. This is just a bolo brand that I know about. It's very niche. There's not a lot of information available on it, but every time I find it, I always flip it super quickly. It's definitely more bread and butter, but it's worth knowing, and it's called Sozy. It stands for soft and cozy, Sozy. And they do make very soft and cozy pieces, but their pieces do look, in my opinion, a little bit more dressy. And I can usually only sell them for like $20 to $30, sometimes like even 18. But again, they always flip super quickly. So when I find them at the bins, it's a no-brainer. They still have a great sell rate on eBay. And so I'm always picking those up. This one took just 8 days to sell. It was a little crop top. I accepted an offer of $21 and my earnings were $16.80 on this piece. Okay, last super quick sale before we move into some of the higher dollar. I sold this pair of Merrell boots. Merrell is an excellent brand to look for. It has been, honestly, for as long as I've been reselling, which has been 10 years now, which is crazy. But this brand is really strong, especially during warmer weather because people are going outdoor. They're hiking, they're walking, they are camping. And so this brand kind of elevates during this time of the year, especially hiking boots is what they're known for. These were called the Merrell Men's Ontario hiking boots. They were size 11 and a half. Some elevated things were they were in pretty good condition. They were also waterproof, so I made sure to highlight that. And they were also that like Gorpcore green and then had that contrast of the orange laces, which is also extremely Gorpcore. So I included Gorpcore in my title, and I think all things combined, this would have been a great sale just because of brand and the style alone. But adding on top of that, it also being very trendy in the aesthetic, I think helped them to sell even quicker. These Merrell boots sold in just 8 days, and I sent out automatic offers to watchers. I listed it originally for $60. They sold for around $54 on an offer, and I ended up earning $39.62 from eBay on this piece. All right, diving into some of the higher priced sales. This one was a pretty surprising sale for me. This is the brand Jack and Jack. I'm not super familiar with this brand, but they do make some pretty pricey pieces. I was lucky enough to get this new with tags. We got this in consignment, I believe. And you can see retails for $500, which is crazy. And what I really wanted to bring up with this is just because something retails for a lot does not always mean it is very high in demand. And so I never put blinders on when that happens. I always make sure, like, is there actually a demand? Could this piece sell? Can it fall into a style-based aesthetic? And with this dress, I thought it absolutely did. So this is a Jack and Jack very like fairy grunge style. It was longer length, it was made out of silk, and it was new with tags. So we used a bunch of different keywords for this one, but specifically fairy grunge, I think was very on par with this piece. And this one ended up selling for $145 on Poshmark, making my order earnings $116. One thing I do like about these like more designer pieces, but also making sure that they're substantial, I find that they sell better on Poshmark. I think people are looking for elevated brands there. That doesn't mean go pick up every designer piece you come across or high retailing and think you can sell it on Poshmark. That's definitely not true. Again, you still need to be able to lean it into demand somewhere. But I do find that Poshmark is a great place for that. So if you're not already on Poshmark and you do have a lot of pieces like that, it could be worth cross-posting onto. Okay, next up, my next highest price sale was this Lily Pulitzer maxi cover up. I actually remember picking this up in the dead of winter and thinking it's so good I have to get it anyways, but I'm probably going to sit on it until warmer weather because it's like swimwear cover up. And I was totally right because this took 178 days to sell. Again, waiting to go into the warmer weather. This was the Lily Pulitzer, very substantial piece, very on par with Lily Pulitzer. I use keywords like vacation, preppy, swim, beach. This is called the Frey Maxi Cover Up, and it was also a size extra large. Very happy to have found this piece at a thrift store. It didn't have the brand label right at the top, which is why a lot of people left it behind. But as soon as I saw this print, I knew she was Lily Pulitzer. And then I went inside and was able to see that it was. So that's a great tip. We talked about Vuori before, maybe not having them. Really any brand this can happen with where you can capitalize on somebody else not knowing that. So pay attention to that and really get to know the brands that you do frequently come across. I listed this for $85. Like I said, took 178 days to sell due to season, and my earnings ended up being $60.44 on this piece. Okay, next up, another newer brand to me. I also got this in consignment. This is Cake for Dinner. This also sold on Poshmark. So again, the higher retailing brand sometimes doing better on Poshmark. This one I was also lucky enough to get new with tags. Let's see, this one retailed for $192. This one is very on trend as well. The style name we did include, it was called the Pixie Smocked Puff Sleeve Dress. Again, not everything in this brand is high sell-through rate, but this can be leaned into many popular aesthetics right now. Very frilly. I could see somebody wearing this to like a garden party, very dainty, like royal core. I see people doing like Bridgerton parties now. I could totally see this there. It's also very coquette, very tightly fitted. So definitely leaned into some of the more popular aesthetics, which is why we still decided to list it. This actually only took 9 days to sell, and that I very much think is due to the keywords that we use to sell this. It sold for an offer of $70 and earnings were $56 on this piece. All right, next up, something else that sold for quite a bit. We did sit on it for a while. I think we either got this at the bins or maybe the thrift store, but paid less than $5 for it, I believe. These are a pair of Theory pants. This brand I do have to be pretty picky on just because, again, sell-through rate as a whole not there, but some of their pieces do perform well. This was actually a pair of new with tags. They were called the Trika pull-on pants, and Theory is pretty well known for their dress pants, which is why despite the low sell-through rate, we took a look at these. After narrowing it down, we thought this was a better style, plus it was new with tags. They did, however, take 151 days to sell. We listed them at $75 and they sold on an offer to watcher for close to $67, and my earnings ended up being $47.43. I think in the future, we'll probably price even more competitively just to make sure that pieces like this move. Okay, I was so excited about this one. This one also sold super quickly and was one of my higher price sales. This is the brand Oshkosh, and it's my first time finding and selling vintage Oshkosh. I guess at this level, it's been like, I think maybe a couple years ago, I sold like a pair of overalls, but nothing like this. And so I found this at the bins and was really excited. It was actually something somebody threw back. And I actually asked you guys in a short video, like, I know nothing about vintage Oshkosh, but I do know that some of them sell pretty well. So like for those of you that know, can you tell me where you would price this at? And you guys were so great. I posted that on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and I got a lot of really great feedback. Some people told me this probably wouldn't sell for more than $25. Some people told me I could price for over 100, but generally in the middle, I saw like 60 to 85-ish dollars from some people in the reseller community that I know are really smart with vintage. And so I weighed their opinions a little bit more heavily, if that makes sense, and decided to kind of go in the middle. So I listed at 60. Had we been like in the dead of winter and not towards the end of it, I probably would have been closer to like 80-ish, but because this was plaid, it was corduroy, darker colors, definitely not spring summer look, I decided to price a little bit more competitively. So listed at 60 and was so happy. It sold within 23 days of being listed, so less than a month, for my full asking price of 60. And my earnings on this little kids piece were $44.13, and I couldn't have paid like more than $1 at the bin. So I made over a $40 profit on a kids piece. And I've mentioned to you guys before, I'm starting to dive into some of the kids stuff. I'm learning a lot from my friend Bethany at Trash Pandas Thrift. If you guys don't already watch her channel, I'd recommend going. She does a lot of kids style based and alternative like ways of reselling, and her and I co-run a mentorship group together also. But I'm learning a lot from her, sharing her information both on YouTube and in the Resellers Edge group. So I'm leaning into her to help me with that, and I'm starting to see success on that. And this is just a good piece to really start that journey off. Okay, next up, one of my higher price sales. This one is actually a little disappointed about. This is the brand Cantha Bay. Very high retail, has a really niche following, but demand goes kind of like up or down. This was a great overall piece. We actually got this at the bins, and you just never know with Cantha insolds. There are some that go for like 50. There's some that go for over 100. I've personally sold these for over 100 before, but I think it really just depends on like the pattern, plus the time of the year. We listed these in winter. And so I've had these for 144 days. I initially priced them a lot higher, I think around like 85 or something like that. And they just sat, probably because it was winter. And anyways, I ended up dropping the price and ended up selling it on an offer for $57.51. My earnings were $42.11. Still a great return on investment, especially from a piece coming from the bins, but yeah, I was just a little disappointed. I definitely thought that it would sell for higher because I've sold them in the past, but you guys know me, my goal is to sell things in 90 days. So after 90 days hits, like it's got to go out at all costs. All right, moving on to some honorable mentions, just things that I wanted to point out to you guys that I'm looking for that are doing well for me, that really didn't fit into the other categories. This is the brand Les Artistes by Spring Step. I come across a lot of these shoes in my area, and the brand as a whole, in my opinion, is not a brand you want to get in everything, but something that has performed well for me are their boots. And so I continue to pick them up, and I found like the right keywords with most of these and like aesthetics to lean them into. So they work really well for me. These ones are the Perignon polka dot wingtip boots. So I made sure to include the style name. By the time I did that, not much room left in the title. But some other keywords that I use with these are like I lean them into artsy. Sometimes depending on how they look, steampunk even can be really good. These ones did not scream that to me, but they sold really well. I listed these for $55 on eBay. They sold on an offer to watcher for around $49. My earnings were $38.88. And they sold within just 23 days, which is good for boots during this time of the year. So I wanted to mention this. I do have some pretty good luck selling these, and I do pick them up all year round. I'm just pretty competitive with pricing. Okay, next up is another just shout out here. This one is Chaps. This is a brand I like never get, but this men's blazer really stuck out to me. It was very unique, and I do love looking for statement pieces. This one I knew I could lean into some of the like trending aesthetics that were going on, and so I used keywords such as derby, frat, and New England. And I definitely think those keywords are what sold this Chaps blazer. I listed this for $50. I was just kind of experimenting. I wasn't really sure what it would sell at. And it took 136 days to sell, which is a little bit longer than I would have liked. But it did end up selling for $45 and my earnings were $33.36. So I'm going to continue looking for statement blazers like this. And yeah, I think this very like New Englandy type look in the men's department is a style aesthetic that can perform well. Okay, next up, something else I wanted to mention. This is great bread and butter, but also sometimes bolo money for me in the summer, which is J. Crew dresses. This, I don't pick up a whole lot of J. Crew, but definitely in spring and summer, their longer length dresses perform well for me, and sometimes I can get quite a bit of money for them. So this was a J. Crew tiered smocked midi dress. It was all over black, but that smocking and the tiered together really pulling this through. I listed this for $40 and I got it from the bins. It ended up selling for my full asking price and my earnings were close to $28 on this piece. So again, sometimes bread and butter, sometimes more, but I do focus on the longer lengths. Next up, something else I'm still picking up, but being a little bit more cautious on is cashmere. You guys saw that J. Crew chocolate brown sweater being one of my fastest sales in the beginning. Here's another one that sold really well and honestly pretty quickly. But just being careful that cashmere is definitely a warmer weather fabric, even though it is very luxurious and people look for it. You're really going to have to give a buyer a good deal in the middle of summer to get it to move quickly. Or you can focus on substantial pieces, which is what I try. I try to do both actually, but this one is a very substantial piece. And so I still picked it up, even though it definitely is going out of season. So this is Saks Fifth Avenue Cashmere. I have really good luck with Saks Fifth Avenue Cashmere, as well as like Nordstrom Cashmere, Garnet Hill, Everlane. Like there's a couple brands I can think of that I don't normally pick up, but I do in cashmere and they do really well. So this is the Saks Fifth Avenue cashmere sweater. The reason I still got this one is because it was a zip pullover, so a little bit more substantial of a piece. I used keywords on this one such as oversized because it was like very oversized fit. And I do think that helped to sell that as well. I listed this for $40 and it sold within just 17 days of being listed on an offer to watcher for around $36 and my earnings were close to $26 on this piece. And that's $26 I wouldn't have had if I just X this out because of seasonality. So kind of playing tug of war in my head, making sure that there are factors there that can still pull the sale through, but also being cautious that I don't want to overload my store with out of season items. All right, next up, something else I wanted to point out, very similar to J. Crew in spring and summer, I do really well with modern Abercrombie and Fitch dresses. This one is specifically the Emerson dress. And this is their mini version of that. With Abercrombie, I also try to focus on longer lengths. However, there are certain styles that I know perform well, even in shorter lengths for Abercrombie and Fitch. And this is one of them. Anytime I'm seeing like puff sleeves with the short bust line, definitely something I'm looking into. So this one was an extra small petite, not the greatest size, but it was new with tags. So that's why we still got this one. I listed this one for $40. It sold on an offer for around $36 and my earnings were close to $29. And this took 169 days to sell. Next up, another and final honorable mention. This one is just a Y2K piece. This is just INC, but I'm still picking up a lot of factor stacked Y2K tops. It's actually one of my best selling categories still. And so pieces like this where it's a very unique dark floral print, very whimsical. It's got flare sleeves and it's a true vintage label. lots of factor stacking there, but still doing really well with the Y2K pieces. And this one I leaned into Whimsy Goth and Dark Romantic. I listed this one for $30 and it sold for my full asking price within just 82 days. So just met the mark of my 90-day goal. And my earnings were close to $21 on this piece. Again, if you haven't already started leaning into style-based sourcing, especially going into summer, it can be a really good addition, not only to your sourcing, but also to your sales, and make it easier for you to find profitable pieces in a time where it's harder to make profits going into summer slowdown. So wanted to mention this piece. And again, this has been just an incredible avenue for me, and I'm selling tons and tons of Y2K tops. Okay, moving on to a few pieces that I just regret I wouldn't pick up anymore. This one is not a brand I would memorize. It's called Sussy Code. One of our sourcers at the time picked this up just because it had factors that leaned into certain aesthetics, such as fairy, ethereal, artsy. However, not all of the factors were there. And looking at the piece as a whole, it definitely does not scream any aesthetic, and also just looks a lot like too mature for the buyer that would be purchasing a fairy top, an ethereal top, an artsy top, right? Maybe artsy can lean into mature sometimes, but it just like, there was again, I always go back to like tug of war. There's good things, there's bad things. I think the bad things outweighed the good things in this piece. And so just wanted to talk through this. After 90 days of this sitting, I accept pretty much any offer to get this to move because I can tell not really a piece worth battling on offers for. This took 178 days to sell, and I ended up accepting an offer of $11 just to get it to move. My earnings were only $8.05. I did pick this up, or somebody picked this up at the bins for us, and so I still made money, but definitely not a piece I would pick up again. Okay, same thing with this one. This one sold on Depop. This is a brand Plissé. I come across a lot of these, and you guys probably do too. They're like lightweight crinkle tops. They feel very luxurious. This one I thought could be leaned into Y2K, but again, I think it's leaning slightly too mature. The pattern print kind of confusing as to where you're going to lean it in to that specific Y2K buyer. And so I just, again, there's a lot weighing it down versus the good things. And so I wouldn't pick up this piece again. This one I listed for $29 on Depop. And again, this was over 90 days. It actually took 108 days to sell. And I accepted an offer of $18 to get this one moving. My earnings were $15.31. And last one, this one might look familiar. I can't remember if I showed this in a what sold or not, but this one actually sold and got returned. And the reason this one sold and got returned is because this is an incredible style-based piece. Like, dresses like this are so on trend, but the lister at the time did not realize that this size 12 was actually a girl's size 12 and not a women's size 12, even though to me it was very obvious that it was not a women's size 12. It was very tight on the mannequin, but we didn't recognize it. We listed it as a women's. It got returned for an INAD, and we relisted it again. I made sure to state that this item is a kid's 12, but fits like a women's extra small, and it sold very quickly after that. And I priced very competitively, again, just because it's a really tough sale for your buyer, even with a very on-trend piece, to talk about like changes in sizing. They're always going to be wondering like, okay, will this really fit me? It's a kid's piece. Like, there's just a lot more hurdles for your buyer to get over. And so I don't do this very often, but because this was such an on-trend piece, I decided to go ahead and list it and just get some money back. So this very quickly sold. I think I listed it for $25, and it sold on an offer for $18, which I happily accepted on Poshmark because Poshmark does not accept returns for fit. And so because I had all the information there, I felt confident that the buyer was going to have to keep the item. And my earnings were $14.40. All right, guys, so that's it for what sold last week. I hope that you enjoyed watching. If you're not already, consider subscribing down below if you want to be notified when these videos go live each week. If you guys had a favorite sale in your own store, drop them in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.